More on what's happening on this trial, my colleague, Karel O'Hara, spoke with legal affairs journalist, our friend Meghann Cuniff. Here's their conversation with these updates.
Already 3 judges assigned to this case. Let's break it down for our viewers. Why is there a 3rd judge now presiding over this?
Well, the first judge who we'd come to know over the last 19 months, Judge Glanville, was kicked off the case after recusal motions were filed over a secret chambers meeting he'd had with a witness. The defense was upset that they weren't notified about the meeting, first of all, and then they were upset about the contents of the meeting and what happened with this witness. It didn't turn out to be the meeting that did Judge Glanville in. It was his reaction to these recusal motions. It turns out that Georgia especially has well-established case law that when a judge is hit with a recusal motion like this, they are not supposed to defend themselves on the record. There's even some case law that says no matter how defamatory they feel these statements are, they are supposed to remain neutral. And if these allegations on their face could, as taken as true, are enough to recuse them, they need to send the recusal motion to another judge. And Judge Glanville did not do that. He initially rejected this recusal motion and defended himself on the record. And then he walked it back a few days later and ended up sending it to another judge. But by that time, it was too late. The new judge, the judge who had the recusal motions, said that he erred by defending himself and said that he needed to be removed from the case. That was the first recusal. It goes to another judge who turns out to feel that she has a conflict of interest. This is Judge Ingram in Atlanta, Georgia, Shakura Ingram. And it turns out her former courtroom deputy is the courtroom deputy who was arrested last year in the case and accused of having an inappropriate relationship with one of the defendants. This defendant actually had his case severed from trial. He is not currently on trial, but if Judge Ingram had continued on with this case, that defendant's case would be her case. So she was saying, look, my former deputy could be called as a witness here. And because of that, I could actually be called as a witness here. So she felt she needed to recuse herself. And that ends up with our 3rd judge. That's our 2nd recusal. And it goes to the 3rd judge, who looks to be the new judge on the case, Judge Whitaker. She's the judge who held a status conference this morning in Fulton County Superior Court and made clear that she's going to be presiding over the trial from here on out.
See, that already was a lot to keep up with. I'm here trying to go through all of these videos, 3 different judges trying to give our viewers a picture, kind of the scene that we're getting from the courtroom. Meghann, when we first started speaking about this case several months ago by now, you had mentioned that this was going to be in it. We're going to be in it for the long haul, so to speak. I can't imagine that continuing to replace these judges is going to make this trial go by any faster, will it?
No, but I think we are done with the judge replacement wheel. And this judge appears to be much more efficient in terms of time management than we've been used to with Judge Glanville and his self-professed comfort breaks. She has made clear that she does not want any time wasted, no lapses between witnesses, and she wants to start at 8:45 every morning, which anyone who's used to watching the trial under Judge Glanville knows that would be quite a change. And just little things like that. If she does things like that and keeps them on track and no longer has these marathon comfort breaks, things could speed up a lot. We could see a much quicker trial here.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, something about the Judge Paige Whitaker and how she started that trial a little bit earlier. And kind of reading through reports that are online, every article mostly mentioned how she started these proceedings earlier, really trying to outline the difference between her and the previous 2 judges. I think the next question would be almost the public perception, or maybe even the jury's perception. Now that we've seen 3 judges go to preside over this case, do you think that this is going to impact the outcome of how it all plays out?
It will be interesting to see what the attorneys argue in their inevitable mistrial motions about how the jury must be perceiving this. And what's it going to be like for the jurors who got to know Judge Glanville and are right now on a break and presumably under order from the court? They're not supposed to be reading anything about the case. So we're supposed to give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't know anything about this right now. What are they going to think when there's a new a judge on the scene? But I think the understanding is that they shouldn't read any prejudice on the defendant's half because of that. So it definitely remains to be seen the future of the trial. I think the judge made it clear she's going to be doing everything she can to move forward with the current jury, but we still have a lot of motions to be filed, and the defense has a lot of legal arguments that they're raising, and some important ones really that need to be sorted out before we get any kind of testimony resumed here.
Let's outline what happened in court this morning as Judge Whitaker held a status hearing. Explain to our viewers what a status hearing is. What did we see happen?
I'd say it was a status conference, and it was more just a scheduling conference. This is when a judge isn't planning on hearing any kind of motion, and it was clear she wasn't going to make any substantive rulings because the defendants were not in court. And the defendants would need to be in court, or they would need to waive their appearances for her to be talking about substantive issues like that. This was kind of almost a meet and greet in the beginning for her and the attorneys, and then just where are we? She wanted to talk about dates, and she established some ground rules. The biggest news, first of all, being that the motions are due next Tuesday, July 23rd. Prosecutors have until Friday to respond, July 26th, and then they're back in court on July 30th, and she's looking to move fast. They're going to start at 8:45 and go all day to sort through motions, and she's trying to get the case back on track to go before a jury. But of course, there are going to be mistrial requests that she's going to be deciding. But she implemented some ground rules, like no eating in court, and that's definitely going to be a change for some of the defendants. But really, one of the biggest eaters in court that I've seen was Judge Glanville. So Judge Whitaker has said that this isn't a movie theater. We're not going to be eating popcorn in here. She had some questions about the headphones that we often see defendants wearing. It looks like they're listening to things on laptops and things like that, and she wanted to know why. And one of the defense attorneys said that it was basically just allowed to combat boredom. And she said, well, we aren't going to be bored moving forward, and said that the listening to the headphones will stop. She also took issue with the number of outfits that the defendants have. She's regulating on the drip that the defendants are bringing into the courtroom. Young Thug has a whole rotation. I mean, we do see him repeat outfits sometimes, but not very often. But she was saying that the deputies talked to her about how they feel it's just too much. There's just too many outfits back there. So she wants them, the attorneys, to cut down on that to about 5 a week or so. She said nobody needs to have 20 outfits back there. So that's going to be a big change. But just time management in general is going to be a big change. But so much remains to be seen about what the case is going to look like going forward, and will the jury be told that they need to somehow disregard some of the testimony that they've already heard? That's one big legal issue that's coming up, is everything that Judge Glanville did after the recusal motions were filed against him. What's going to happen to that? Because the jury heard a lot of testimony from the key witness at the heart of the secret chambers meeting after that. And Georgia law states that when a judge is recused, everything the judge did after the recusal motion, or there's some precedent that it's invalid for the trial. So that would be much of Kenneth Copeland's testimony. So right now it's a question of what is that going to look like, and what's the Judge Whitaker gonna say going forward on that. And then, of course, the big question is if we're going to see the jury again, and then when are we going to see the jury again?
Meghann, I just have to point out a couple of things that you did mention that I found really interesting, kind of these new rules that the judge has imposed, regulating on the drip. It is something that we have seen Young Thug kind of in different outfits every day, kind of flashy, this eating in the courtroom. It almost seems like, when you get a new teacher in a classroom and they start kind of cracking down on what's going on within those walls. What does this say about maybe what this judge even thought at how this was kind of all going up until now before she took over this case? And how do those little changes even affect trial proceedings?
I think a lot of this was her probably knowing that she was taking over such a high profile case. I think it would be standard for judges to want to meet with the sheriff's department about such a high profile, high security trial and just say, hey, how are things going? What are some things that I should know? And pretty clearly, the sheriff's office had a wish list about things going on in the trial that they have some concern with. So I'm sure that's how that came about.
Let's talk about these motion hearings that we're going to have next week. So today, this status conference, as you mentioned, with the attorneys there meeting with the judge, this sort of meet and greet. So next week, we're going to get down to more official business, would you say? And how is that going to look? What are we going to hear from the defense and from prosecutors?
I think the two big issues right now are mistrial motions. Some attorneys do feel it's in their client's best interest that they start over. That there's been too many errors baked into this case, and that just the issue with Kenneth Copeland's testimony and the invalidation of it that might happen warrants a mistrial. There's also the issue of, did the prosecutors, by being involved in this ex parte meeting with the judge and the witness, did they make themselves witnesses themselves? And Young Thug's lawyer is arguing yes, and he's actually filed a motion asking for them to be recused. So it's things like that if theoretically the prosecutors were recused from the case, obviously that would be a big setback, and the idea that this would just continue as is doubtful. But those are the kind of issues we're going to see the judge deal with on the 30th. The big ones are, should there be a mistrial? Should the defendants get bail? It's unclear when exactly she's going to consider bail requests, but we've already gotten one bail requested, and because the 6 defendants actually work together in that it's assumed that when one of them files a motion, they all join in on it unless they vocally say, no, I don't want to be involved in this motion. So they've technically all requested bail under this one bail motion, but I do think we're going to be seeing separate filings on that from their own attorneys, just because that's such a crucial issue. But the big issues are mistrial, bail, and then what do we do about Kenneth Copeland's testimony and what portions of it are supposed to be invalidated.
You know, Meghann, this is one of those trials that I think it would be impossible if in one conversation we were able to kind of detail everything that is important that viewers need to watch out for, given all the changes that have happened within the courtroom and all of the witnesses that we've already heard from. So I guess really the final point that I would like you to make is, what do we need to be on the lookout for going forward? Anything that we really should focus and hone in on? What should the viewers' takeaway be from this trial thus far?
I would definitely encourage anyone who's interested in the trial, especially if testimony does resume, is to really look at what the evidence is about this supposed organized crime conspiracy that has 6 men, really more than that, because there are co-defendants who aren't on trial right now, who are actually awaiting trial in jail. Look at the evidence that they have that's keeping these men behind bars without bail, and ask yourself if it's enough, and if they've shown enough to really justify what a big case this is, when the prosecution seems to be lacking in a lot of areas. And hopefully this renewed focus on the case will kind of bring some new attention to the evidence and the testimony if it gets going again.
Meghann Cuniff, legal affairs journalist, always a pleasure to have you with us here on Live Now from Fox. You help us really understand and examine, dissect all of these trials, these cases that we monitor very closely. We look forward to checking in with you soon, and kind of can't wait to see how this time plays out. Again, a 3rd judge, the newest one appointed to